What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be going through Week 7 power rankings and predictions for the 2024 UFL season. Now, yes, this is a very new setup. I have jerry-rigged this setup together because I'm in the process of moving right now, and I'm going to be spending my summer in a different state because of an internship. So I'm packing stuff up, and actually I'm going to be hitting the road tomorrow. So I apologize for lighting and sound quality and even my posture. I kind of have to slump over here to be able to project my voice into the microphone right, but don't worry. That's also why the college football content has been slow. It'll be back. Things are really going to start ramping up here next week. We're getting into prediction season. It's getting really, really close for all you college football fans out there, so make sure you stay tuned. But regardless, for you spring football fans, here's your Week 7 power rankings and predictions for the 2024 UFL season. Before we dive into that, though, make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe, share my video, even watch more of my videos. Any ways that you support the channel, much like the ways I just listed and more, are greatly appreciated, and I thank you so much. But without wasting any more time, you guys probably already know who the number one team in the UFL is. It is not really any mystery whatsoever. I mean, come on, it's the Birmingham Stallions. Do I have to really say much else about this team? I don't think so. This has been the best team up and down, but we do have to talk about a little bit of things with the Birmingham Stallions. Firstly, well, part of the reason they are the number one team right now, right? They have clinched a spot in the playoffs. They're the first team to do so. In fact, they are the earliest team to do so in either XFL or USFL history to clinch a playoff spot. Only through 6 weeks. The Birmingham Stallions are already going to be a team that are in the playoffs. Likely will end up being that number one team, that top team out of the USFL division. But we do have to talk about a couple things with this team. One, they have found their quarterback one. Skip Holtz goes to this 2-quarterback system. Then whenever a quarterback pulls away, boom, that is quarterback number one. This year, Adrian Martinez, I think he's bona fide QB1. I still think we're going to see Matt Corral here and there, but for the first time, for the first time this season, only one quarterback played against an opponent. Adrian Martinez was the only quarterback to see the field in their 39-21 win over the Memphis Showboats. And to me, that means that Martinez is going to be the quarterback moving forward here. But what he brings to this offense with his arm talent and the talent on the ground with his legs, something really, really special. He's got some great running backs, some great weapons. The defense is one of, if not the top in the USFL. And speaking of the defense, this pass rush, to which through the first 3 to 4 weeks really was dominant and really had to what I'll say, very, very good feel and was able to affect the game so much. Kind of flattened out over the past couple of weeks. They got back to it, I believe, had 3 or 4 sacks against the Showboats in that game. So the defense got back to what they were doing with that pass rush. The linebacking group has been phenomenal. The secondary, albeit maybe like to see a little bit more production tackling out of the secondary. They haven't really had to be fair. But that's really that with the Birmingham Stallions. They have found their quarterback one. The skill position room is loaded. The defense is loaded. The pass rush is coming back to life. And they are the only team thus far to clinch a playoff spot in the UFL playoffs. Moving on here to number 2. Yes, I know. I didn't talk about one thing with the Stallions. That's because I can't wait to talk about it when I do my predictions. Number 2 has stayed the same as well. It's the St. Louis Battlehawks. 5-1 on the year. They did pick up a win, 22-8 over the Houston Roughnecks this past week. And ever since dropping that first game against the Michigan Panthers, they're sitting 5-1. And you could argue that if St. Louis's offense wasn't that slow and didn't really almost get a full game until they finally got going against that Panthers team in week 1, they'd be sitting here undefeated right now. But you know what? It doesn't matter because they're looking to be on track to clinch the second playoff spot. I don't know that they can do it this week, but over these next couple of weeks, I do think they have a chance to be able to do so. Pretty difficult road to be able to do it, though. You got Birmingham, DC, and San Antonio left on the schedule, as well as a date with Arlington, which, from the way that they've played, I know they're still winless right now, and yes, we'll get to them. that is definitely still a team that can compete and that can fight. Look at their first game that St. Louis played against them in week 2. But A.J. McCarron is on MVP track. He looks absolutely outstanding. 1,306 yards is second in the league, only to that of a quarterback that we'll talk about later. 13 touchdowns is what A.J. McCarron has, even has a touchdown on the ground. Now, the run game has been a little shaky as Jacob Sailors is really starting to ramp it up. Mateo Durant is hurt right now, or at the very least is inactive. So once he gets back onto the field, though, he is going to affect the game in a different way. You also do have Wayne Gallman back there as well. The run game just not, in my opinion, what it needs to be to especially compete with a team like Birmingham without Mateo Durant, but the wide receiver core is fantastic, and the defense, well, has improved week over week, and now they find themselves tops in the league in yards per game allowed. I think they're only allowing 230 yards per game, somewhere along that number. For a defense that really struggled to get things going this year, those are some very, very impressive numbers. And as long as A.J. McCarron can continue on this MVP track, this is going to be the best team in the XFL's. This is going to be the best team in the XFL division, as well as to what I believe is the second best team, to which everyone believes is the second best team in the UFL. Huge matchup coming up this week. I didn't really talk about it with Birmingham, but Birmingham and St. Louis are facing off this week. You don't want to miss it. I'm going to be previewing that matchup here in just a little bit. But let's move on now. Talk about the team I have at number 3. Despite the loss to the DC Defenders, San Antonio still has the third best record in the league, or at least tied for it. That's why they're sitting here at number 3. However, they were very, very close to slipping down to number 4 because DC did beat them, because Michigan won this past week, and because overall I just haven't been that impressed with San Antonio, especially out of the quarterback room over the past couple of weeks. Quentin Dormady, yeah, while he has his good moments, has turnover issues, right? 5 interceptions. Now, John Lovett, he's been absolutely fantastic for this team. Since Anthony McFarland went down, John Lovett has really stepped up. He has proven to be a big-time playmaker for this team, and I think will continue to do so. Morgan Ellison has kind of slotted it as that running back 2, now that Lovett is the running back 1, right? And you still got some very explosive weapons on the outside. Kirkland, Stevenson, Smith, and Latimer are all over or darn near close to that 200-yard mark, and the defense plays really, really well as well. In fact, you have 3 of some of the top tacklers in the UFL. That's Devontae Beckett and Jordan Williams. Possibly, you could argue, what's the best linebacker duo in this league. And then Jordan Mosley, who's one of the best defensive backs in this league, just from a pure tackling standpoint. But the mistakes are starting to pile up for San Antonio. 1, you have Quentin Dormady's interception issue. That has to get fixed. Chase Garbers didn't really do that. Now, there were a couple throws that Garbers would like to have back, but Dormady, while he's been pretty good for the most part, he's got to hold on to that football. He can't be giving the defense these free passes, right? And then when you talk about penalties, they're still the most penalized team in the league. I think they even had 7, yes, they had 7 penalties against the DC Defenders. Ultimately, what also helped them to losing that game as well were the amount of penalties that they had. So for this team, look, you have some phenomenal playmakers, and Quentin Dormady, we've seen flashes. He has the raw talent. This defense is really good as well, especially, again, in that linebacking unit. If the defense can continue to play at a high level, they limit the amount of turnovers and they limit the penalties. They start to get a little more disciplined. This is going to be a dangerous team come the postseason, but they have a very, very difficult road to clinching a postseason berth. We'll see how San Antonio fares down the stretch after that loss to DC. They split the season series with the Defenders, who I have at number 4. Now, discipline definitely helped them win that game, right? Sorry, I just realized I had the wrong team up there. San Antonio is a team they beat, not St. Louis. Obviously, they dropped that game to St. Louis embarrassingly. They were able to beat San Antonio in their past game. Jordan Ta'amu had a pretty impressive day himself. Again, not a whole lot of scoring in this game. It definitely was a very defensive, one-sided game, but again, Quentin Dormady's interception issues. Now, granted, this defense did force those picks, but Dormady's interception issues helped. The discipline issues over on San Antonio helped. And overall, DC definitely just looked like the better team here, right? And it was balance, not necessarily explosiveness, but balance that helped this DC team win that game. And I think it's what's going to have to help this DC team win games down the stretch as they try to get into a playoff spot. Now, granted, they do not have the easiest road to do it either, but they have a much easier road than San Antonio. And as long as they can finish with a better record in their conference, then I believe that is the second tiebreaker, at least. If not, correct me in the comment section down below. But as long as DC can finish with a better record in their own division, they're going to get that playoff spot over San Antonio, as it's looking like both teams are on the 6-4 trajectory with the way that their schedule shapes up. Now, could San Antonio absolutely go 5-5? Yes, but DC, again, when you talk about what's going to help this team win games down the stretch, Jordan Ta'amu has been excellent. He's one of the top quarterbacks in this league. He's got to start getting some run help, meaning Cam Harris, Zaquandre White. They've got to be able to step it up here. There's a phenomenal group of wide receivers out there that definitely are going to have to show a little bit of explosive tendencies, but I think take a look at the game plan that just won them the game that they just won, right? Balanced offense is going to help this team win. Unpredictability is going to help this team win, especially since the defense is just not up to code from where it was last season. Now, the defense has some really good players. Michael Joseph, I believe, is the leading tackler in the UFL this year. Anthony Hines is not too far behind him, and they have some great play out of their defensive ends. Now, Derek Roberson, to my knowledge, is hurt right now, which is a big blow here to this team. However, when you talk about what the DC defenders are going to do, they've got to be able to create more pressure defensively, and they have to continue to have this balance offensively. I think that's going to help them win games here down the stretch, just being that unpredictable that team that you can't really predict, right? Especially without why is that name slipping my mind now? The old running back from Baylor. I have no idea why that name is slipping my mind. But the running back that was really good for DC last year, Abram Smith, there you go, just popped in my head. With him being hurt, this team doesn't really have a true identity where they can run the ball and have Jordan Ta'amu hit some shots, right? Ta'amu's got to do a lot of the offense himself. Now, he's not going to be a guy that's going to run the ball 15 times a game like we're going to see out of Adrian Martinez and some of the other quarterbacks in this league, but Cameron Harris, Zaquandre Wright provide some run support there, and Ta'amu, he's going to have to take some shots to these wide receivers here down the stretch as DC looks to push for a playoff spot. That means Michigan has dropped down here to number 5. If the slide would change, there you go. They got a nail-biting win over the Arlington Renegades, a story that we're going to talk about with the Renegades in a minute. But Michigan has kind of switched gears at the quarterback position a little bit. It looks like Danny Etling is going to end up being that guy at quarterback moving forward. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if EJ Perry were to come back onto the scene, but with a 2-to-3 interception ratio compared to Etling's 2-to-1, I mean, yeah, looks pretty favorable that Danny Etling is going to be that guy that's going to be starting at quarterback for the Michigan Panthers moving forward. Wes Hills did not necessarily have his best game this past week, but what helped them win this game again? You guessed it, it was Jake Bates. Try 7 for 7. That included yet another 60-yarder and the eventual game winner. That would be the Arlington Renegades. This is a defense, though, that is going to need its playmakers to step up a little bit more, right? You take a look at some of the offenses that they have coming up. DC is a very capable offensive team. Birmingham, that last week, another very capable offensive team. And Michigan is in prime position right now to get to the playoffs. They have a massive lead over both Memphis and Houston, right? So as long as, and look, you have those two teams coming up on the schedule as well. So as long as Michigan wins the games that they're supposed to win, and we can see little improvements along the way here as well, like maybe an uptick in quarterback play from either Perry or Etling to try to utilize some of these weapons a little bit better, especially Marcus Sims, who, not to say they haven't utilized him well, they have utilized him to perfection. I'm just saying some of the other weapons that they have here as well. And the defense can step up and maybe force a couple pressures, force a couple more sacks, something they're already good at doing. They've kind of gotten away from the past couple of of weeks here. As long as this Michigan defense can step up, can start to play, in my opinion, a little bit better. And this is an offense that can start to provide some balance and have an uptick at the quarterback position. And let's be honest, Jake Bates continues to do what he does. Michigan's going to be a team that we're going to see in the playoffs here. We'll go ahead and move forward from the Michigan Panthers, but they are number 5 to me right now, sitting at 4-2. Let's talk about the bottom 3 teams, because there's no question who the bottom 3 teams are. It's the Houston Roughnecks. Why am I blanking right now? The Memphis Showboats and the Arlington Renegades. We're going to start with the Houston Roughnecks here, who I have at 6. Just a tough loss. It really was. It really was just a very, very tough loss there, because they couldn't really do much of anything. And also, when you play one of the better teams in St. Louis, losses like this are going to happen, especially having to play the best 2 teams in the league back-to-back weeks after coming off your first win against an Arlington or Renegades team that's had a lot of struggles of their own, albeit at home. You had another home game against Birmingham. It's just been hectic for Houston over these past couple of weeks. Granted, they have what I think is a pretty good chance to get their second win over San Antonio, and we will talk about why. It's because their rush defense is such a big upside right now, and this defense gives Houston every single chance that they need to win. Reuben Foster, who I believe was battling some injuries, just did not look like himself over the past couple of weeks in the game against Arlington and the game against Birmingham. But however, in that game against St. Louis, he started to get back to the things that he was doing really, really well throughout most of the beginning portion of that season, which was creating pressure, creating havoc, making his presence felt. Reuben Foster is a very, very good defensive player here, probably one of, if not the best in the league. I know I've said that before about Reuben Foster, but everyone that covers this league, every player in this league thinks really, really highly of him. And when he plays to the best of his ability, it definitely makes a difference on this team. And you saw that just there when Reuben Foster was playing at his best for for Houston. I was looking over at the schedule there at San Antonio. They have San Antonio up next, which is going to make the rush defense even more important, but penalties were the ultimate downfall here in this game. Now, again, that's why I talk about the game against San Antonio. There are 2 teams that get penalized quite a bit. So it's going to be very interesting to watch kind of the penalty and discipline battle. Whichever team is more disciplined, I think definitely going to have a better chance to win. Mark Thompson is starting to see an uptick in his carries and his production as well. This is the wide receiver room that is really starting to get going. Reed Sinnett is starting to figure some things out. I know this is a team that is sitting at 1-5 right now, but there is plenty to like and plenty to be happy about if you are a Houston Roughnecks fan. Maybe not for this year, because you look at the 2 teams that are in your division ahead of you and you take a look at the teams like Michigan and Birmingham, it's going to be pretty tough to get ahead of any of them to get into a playoff spot. However, with that being said, the Houston Roughnecks, I think, have a great chance to maybe pull off a stunner here late, although there are some things that have to get better, especially that discipline and the offensive production is going to have to get a little bit more consistent for them to be able to do that. We'll move on here and talk about the Memphis Showboats, and I'm not going to spend too long because I'm probably going to end up saying a lot of the same stuff I said this past week, or I should say last week, but everything just seems to be going wrong with this team. There was the great win against Houston to start off the season, albeit you kind of collapsed in that second half. There was the great performance through 45, if not 50 minutes in the game against San Antonio. What happened in the past 10? Collapse, and then you've just gotten outclassed your past 4 games. I mean, yes, when you play Birmingham twice, these are games that are bound to happen. St. Louis was there on the schedule as well. They're the second best team in the league, and you just ran into a Michigan team that is playing really, really hot. Again, Michigan's kind of one of the more inconsistent yet surprising teams in the league here, but Memphis has got to get some consistency from their quarterback play. I mean, Troy Williams has not been that good. Yes, he's thrown 4 touchdowns, but 4 picks as well. Case Cookus came back from injury this past week, and he did not look like himself. Now, albeit that's probably due to the injury, give Case Cookus a little bit of time, and I definitely do think that Case Cookus is going to be able to perform and play really, really well as soon as he gets fully 100% healthy. Darius Victor has been kind of up and down over the first couple of weeks. He just wasn't there, then he was, and now he's sort of back to not necessarily being a huge factor in this offense. The defense is just not doing what they did throughout the first what would that be, 110 minutes of football that they played this year. Everything has been sliding downhill for Memphis ever since that game against San Antonio. They've been outclassed the previous games, and you run into an Arlington team that's going to be really, really hungry for their first win. I just don't see a lot going in the direction of Memphis right now. They don't have a lot of momentum. They don't have a lot going for them. They sit bottom half in the league in pretty much every major statistical category. Memphis has got to find something, and they've got to find something fast, because this is the season that looked like it was going to start out really, really good. I believe in my week 2, they were second overall in my power rankings. They've sat at the bottom half ever since that performance against San Antonio. They've got to figure it out. They've got to get some momentum building. Now, before we pivot on to our final team, Nate, how can they get some momentum building? Find some consistency at quarterback play. That's especially going to help if Case Cookus comes back and is going to start to be playing really, really well. They do have a phenomenal group of wide receivers there. Every guy you see on screen that's listed with receiving yards, except for the 2 running backs, of course, have at least 170 yards and 1 touchdown this year. So they can distribute the ball. It's a good group of wide receivers, and there's good talent on this defense, but it has to show up and it has to start performing a whole lot better than it has in the past couple of weeks, which we move on now to our final team, the Arlington Renegades. Oh boy. All right. Closing games is the trouble for this team. You see it on the right-hand side of that slash. Closing games is the trouble. Let me tell you why I know that. Look at the bottom of that little stat thing that's going on all the way over there. Again, can't really point to it because I'm over here and it's all the way over there. But look over there at the very bottom. Close games. There are 4 games, in my opinion, where you have last second to last minute losses. What do I mean by that? Take a look at the game against St. Louis week 2. You missed a potential go-ahead field goal. St. Louis came down the other way, hit the game winner. DC, you had every single chance to win that game at home, get out of this slump. You probably build some momentum from that game and beat Houston the next week as well. Again, that is all hypothetical, but purely talking about that DC game there, just and even you could really say that that's 5 games there, and I'll explain why later. That DC game, DC drives down the field, gets that game-winning field goal. Houston, you're driving down the field yourself, possibly sending the game in the overtime. Maybe you wanted to go for 3 points to try to win it. Nope, Houston forces, I believe it was a turnover on downs or a turnover, something of the nature. They get the defensive stop, and Arlington loses that game. San Antonio, that game was tied entering the 4th quarter. The Brahmas get 10 points in that 4th quarter. It's a 4th quarter collapse for Arlington, and then a game-winning field goal from Jake Bates and the Michigan Panthers. Even when talking about just this previous game here against the Michigan Panthers, Arlington scored with not a lot of time left on the clock at all. Michigan had a great return. Then there was a penalty for Arlington that made it even worse. And even going back to before that, there was almost a very, very costly fumble that would have prevented Arlington from hitting that field goal that they made anyway. So it's just a slew of mistakes and a slew of miscues and misreads in the last portion of these games that are costing the Renegades some wins. The only game that you can really say, well, if things didn't go a little bit different, they could have won, is that game against the Birmingham Stallions. Okay, I'll step off my soapbox for a minute. Sorry for the stutter there. Had to put some words together. And look, that's purely talking about all the hypotheticals, right? If those things happen, then Arlington would be sitting here. If. The thing is, they're sitting with an 0-6 record right now and probably will not be getting into the playoffs to defend their spring league title. It'll be Birmingham that gets a chance to defend their spring league title, and Arlington is sitting on the complete other end of the spectrum right now. This team has good players, and Luis Perez has a phenomenal group of skill position players, especially guys like J.P. Payton and Tyler Vaughn, but that running back room is beat up right now. In fact, Davion Smith was the guy who fumbled that ball, went into the injury tent. Day-Day Hunter is out for the rest of the year. Letty Brown is hurt. a team that's very short on running backs right now, and that's definitely not going to help them down the stretch. The defense has not been great this year. Again, it's shown flashes all throughout the year, but it still has just not been great. Closing games is the thing that Arlington needs to focus on. Getting that one win can make all the difference in the world for how a team plays. It probably really is a confidence thing right now. However, I have faith in the Renegades moving forward, and we'll talk about the matchup with Memphis coming up here in just a little bit. Okay, the Arlington Renegades sit here at number 8. That takes it close to my power ranking, and we're going to jump immediately in talking about them because the two worst teams in my power rankings are facing off this week. It's two teams that, look, it just feels like nothing is going right. Both teams are going to have a chance to build some momentum here, put another win in that win column, or for the Renegades' sake, the first win in that left-hand column. What does each team have to do to be able to win this game? Again, all lines and odds are as of recording this video. So let's talk about the road team first. What can the Memphis Showboats do? Well, I do have a question, especially for this Memphis quarterback room, right? One of two things has to happen here, and it doesn't matter what the head coach of the Showboats decides to go, whatever direction he decides to go at quarterback, but one of two things have to happen. One, how healthy is Case Cookus, and does he get better if he is the starting option? If they elect to go with Troy Williams, is he going to be able to find some rhythm and limit the turnovers? One of two things has to happen. Otherwise, Memphis is not going to be able to build momentum. The offense is not going to have any sort of rhythm whatsoever, and they're just going to look really, really flat. One of these two quarterbacks has to find some sort of rhythm, and I'll even add, I think they have to find some consistent rhythm. Because if they do not find a consistent rhythm, it is going to be really, really hard for this offense to move at all. But I think the secondary here, much like this quarterback room, is a huge key to the Showboats' victory in this game. Why? Well, the secondary is going to be really, really big in the fact that, again, like I just talked about with Arlington, a lot of good skill position players. You have to be able to shut them down and limit what Luis Perez and company are going to be able to do. And I just said it when talking about the quarterback room. Absolutely no turnovers, no mistakes. Do not give this Arlington offense some free possessions, because Luis Perez, again, has one of the best skill position rooms in the entire country, but the defense has not lived up to the hype for the Renegades. This is the defense's chance, right? As well as Perez and company needs some ground game help. Perez is going to have to provide a little bit of run relief just with how beat up the running back room is for Arlington right now. However, when you talk about this ground game for the Arlington Renegades, I believe Davion Smith is still going to be healthy, still going to be ready to go. He's got to have some game to get some of that weight off of Luis Perez's shoulders. Now, the leading passer in the UFL this year, I think he'll have no problem slinging the football downfield to a couple of his targets, but he needs some help. He needs some balance. This is the defense's chance to really shine for the Arlington Renegades and to pick up a good performance, but can they perform in clutch time? I do think that this is going to be a very close game. I think the Memphis secondary is, for the most part, going to do what they need to do. There are going to be some big plays here and there. Memphis secondary is too many holes, and Arlington, with Luis Perez at quarterback, has proven they can create that big play. Arlington is the 5.5-point favorite for a reason, guys, and I'm going to go with them, and I'm going to go with them to cover here. This offense has been really, really hot, and I don't think that even if Luis Perez doesn't get a whole ton of ground game relief, I do think that Davion Smith is going to provide a little bit of it, and too many holes here for Memphis. I believe that Arlington I know this is going to sound weird to say, but I believe they have more going for them than Memphis, which you might say, well, that's weird. Memphis has a win, Arlington doesn't. Yeah, but both these teams are on 5-game losing streaks. Obviously, Arlington on a 6-game losing streak here. The defense has got to get better. Luis Perez needs some help. I think all those things are going to happen, and Arlington will pick up their first win of the UFL season. We just talked about the two worst teams according to my power rankings. Let's talk about the two best teams according to my power rankings. UFL fans, this is what you have been waiting for, and I'm not really going to talk about any keys. Well, yes, you can take a look at the keys that I have listed here. I'm going to talk about this game as a whole, because really anything I could say for one of these teams you could say for the other team there as well. However, I do want to talk about a couple of storylines here. Let's start with the quarterback play. One, Adrian Martinez, a dual threat quarterback, has taken over the number one spot in Skip Holtz's offense, and his dual threat ability is going to pose trouble for any defense that they have to play. Now, they are coming up against the best defense in the league when it comes to limiting the amount of yards per game. So I think it's going to be a very interesting battle to see how Martinez in the skill position room utilizes his dual threat ability, utilizes the big playmaking ability of some of these skill position players, and as well as how St. Louis is going to defend them, because they're going to have to create some pressure. The secondary is going to have to come up huge here, and they're going to really have to be able to limit the Stallions' big play explosiveness efforts, right? But you look on the other side, the other quarterback battle with his skill position room. A.J. McCarron is back in Alabama, where he played college. He was 20-3, I believe, as a starter in the state of Alabama as the University of Alabama quarterback. I think he's going to have an absolutely huge game in his wide receiver room. Well, they're going to have a tough ask with the Birmingham Stallions secondary as well. Now, you could argue that based off of sheer stats and raw talent, that St. Louis has the better room when it comes to the wide receivers. However, I would argue that these two rooms are pretty darn even. Birmingham has got some real ballers there, and sure, they may not have the stats, but that's because Birmingham is going to be able to utilize that dual threat ability of Adrian Martinez, and they have more of a run game here, right? Look, both teams are going to have to be able to limit the opposing team's run game. However, the Stallions are going to need to key in on the pass a little bit more than what St. Louis does, which in my opinion makes the job a little bit easier because you know a little bit more of what to expect. St. Louis is going to be a team that's going to air this thing out more often than they're going to put the ball on the ground. Birmingham is going to do both. This is a dual threat offense that can run the ball, can throw the ball, and I think gives them a little bit of an edge here against the St. Louis Battlehawks, and there's explosive playmaking on both sides here, right? St. Louis has got some very explosive playmakers. The Stallions have some very explosive playmakers as well, and I think with the Stallions' home field advantage and with the way that they were able to utilize the dual threat ability of Adrian Martinez will be a little bit too much for the Battlehawks to handle. I could clearly see this one going either way. I think this is going to be an absolutely phenomenal game, but again, the Stallions have a couple things going for them. One is the dual threat ability of Adrian Martinez. For as good of a quarterback as A.J. McCarron is, and probably a guy that's going to end up winning the MVP of this league if he continues to play as well as he does, Adrian Martinez is the guy that just affects the game in a different way, and I think it's going to matter, and home field is going to matter here too. Birmingham has got a really good home field advantage, and look, they're not playing in the Dome in St. Louis, to which I believe is the best home field advantage in the UFL. Birmingham is going to win this game, but I think it's going to be tight. I love St. Louis to cover that 4.5-point spread that you saw, but I love Birmingham to win the game. 27-24, it's also a part of just prove it, right? If you are a team that can go compete for a UFL title, possibly a preview right here of the UFL championship game, if you're a team that wants to go win a UFL championship, you have to beat the best team in the league. That's the Birmingham Stallions. No one has proven to do that so far, which is why I am going with the Stallions over the Battlehawks. And we got two more games on the slate here. Those both games taking place on Saturday. These two games going to be taking place on Sunday. Very interesting one here. 4 and 5 are going to be battling it out. It's the Michigan Panthers and the DC Defenders. This is a very important game for both teams, but I'll talk about why it's more important for the home team in just a little bit. Right now, though, let's talk about your keys for the Michigan Panthers. And one, the pass game is going to need its share of plays. DC is a team that struggles defensively, which is weird because it was a really good defense just a season. It was a really good defense just a season ago. This is a Michigan team that we know can run the ball. If Wes Hills has a good game, sure, that's great and all, but you're going to need to be able to challenge this DC secondary as well. The pass game needs its fair share of plays, and especially being able to utilize a weapon like Marcus Sims. is going to bode really, really well for the Panthers in this game. They got to get that pass game going. You could say the same thing about DC, which I will in just a little bit, but DC's inconsistency on offense is going to play right into the Panthers game. Albeit, I just said that I don't think the defense has played up to its own standard over the past couple of weeks. Perfect opportunity for them to do that right here. Their inconsistent play offensively for the DC defenders will play into what the Michigan Panthers want to do, because they want to be able to provide pressure, right? And they want to be able to limit the effect that Jordan Ta'amu is going to have on the game and basically make them pick, run or pass. What are you going to do? I think that sets up really nicely for the Michigan Panthers. And one weakness that I do see here, Jake Bates is going to be back outside. The one outside game that he did kick against Memphis, he didn't necessarily fare too well. He's going to be back outside at Audi Field here in Washington, D.C., which, again, we know he is the go-ahead field goal hero on many occasions for the Michigan Panthers this year. We'll see if it comes down to a scenario like that. But for Jordan Ta'amu, much like what the Michigan Panthers have to do, both these teams can run the ball pretty darn well. Michigan's proven it more so than DC, but DC has shown flashes. Jordan Ta'amu and these wide receivers are going to have to perform really, really well, especially with, again, while this team has shown flashes of being able to run, they are not consistent in doing so whatsoever. So Jordan Ta'amu and these wide receivers, especially against a Michigan secondary that's really, really pretty darn solid, they're going to have to perform really, really well. But focus on the run defensively. You want Michigan to make them beat you with their pass game. And honestly, if Danny Etling's going to be able to beat you with his arm, you just got to do one of these. Just clap, tip of your cap, because he hasn't really shown a dynamic playmaking ability with his arm quite yet, outside of being able to connect with an explosive guy in Marcus Sims. If DC can shut down Marcus Sims and focus all of their efforts on that run, it's going to be a lot easier on this DC offense to be able to go help them win the game. But this is a crucial game for both. I think DC is primed just a little bit better to be able to win this game. I think they're primed better for a couple reasons. One, I think getting that win against San Antonio was huge for this team. Michigan is coming off a scare against the Arlington Renegades, and having Jake Bates back outside is an advantage for DC, but also this is a much more important game for DC than it is for Michigan, especially when you take a look at the divisional standings. When you take a look at the standings for the XFL conference, DC needs this game. Michigan, they don't really need this game. They're sitting in front of Memphis and Houston pretty comfortably here. DC is going to play desperate. They're going to come out. They're going to win this game. I got 20-16, grinded out defensive battle, but DC is going to have a little bit more offense, and that's what helps them win this game. Final game here, won't spend too long on it. It's the Brahmas and the Roughnecks. I think you already know where I'm going with this game, so let me just say what the Brahmas do have to do to be able to pull out this win convincingly. Dormady has to secure the ball, especially with the fact that Chase Garbers might very well be out for the rest of the season. Dormady has got to cut back on the interceptions. That is plain. That is simple. It needs to happen. But it's going to be a challenge against this Houston defense that loves to force turnovers. Now, albeit they're not generating the amount of pressure that they have, or I should say that they did in the first couple of weeks. They started to get back to that last week, though. It's just been really tough going for Houston to be able to create that pressure. However, when you take a look at what this Houston team is capable of, yes, this is a run game that with John Lovett could prove to be very, very could prove. Well, my apologies sincerely, could prove itself. What am I even trying to say? Okay, let me take a step back here. This is a run game with John Lovett and the San Antonio Brahmas that's going to need to prove, hey, we can break through this tough defensive front of Houston. Run, stop, and collapse the pocket are their keys on defense for the San Antonio Brahmas. For the Houston Roughnecks, you got to be able to create some dynamic plays. It's a San Antonio team that, again, it is just not very good at defending the explosive play. They haven't been. They weren't against St. Louis. They weren't against DC at times. This is a Brahmas team that very much so can be plagued if the other team could create some dynamic plays, which means Mark Thompson, TJ Pledger, rip off a big run. Reed Sinet, find a guy deep downfield and sling that baby up there. Give your wide receiver a chance to go win that 50-50 ball. As I just talked about with the pass rush here, right? The defensive line needs to be creative in its packages. It's got to start generating some pass rush. Force Stormady into throwing some more picks. That's what the Roughnecks have to do to win this game. And like I talked about, penalties have really plagued both teams here. So while they've plagued the Brahmas more statistically, they're going to plague the Roughnecks here in this game too. Laundry is going to be all over the field in this game, I think. So to me, it comes down to which team has the better skill. And while defensively, I definitely think that's Houston. Offensively, I think that's San Antonio. Yes, Dormady has some interception problems, but I don't think that Houston's offense is going to be able to keep up. I think San Antonio's offense creates enough. Dormady is going to get a little bit better here, you'll see, and John Lovett has proven to be way too explosive of a back. He can go carry for carry with Mark Thompson and TJ Pledger in this game. San Antonio wins a defensive thriller in Houston. That's going to be all I got for my Week 7 Power Rankings predictions. I promise that the acoustics and sound and everything will sound a lot better, and it won't be as jerry-rigged as what I threw together here today. Hey, enjoy your UFL weekend, NHL, NBA playoffs, whatever else you watch, and remember to play hard but tailgate harder. The college football content will be back this upcoming week. Goodbye.